Your next guest is Jeff Bradbury. He is the director of digital learning and the creator of the TeacherCast Educational Network. With a background in music education, Jeff began performing in front of live audiences at a very early age. He grew to love the opportunities he had working with others. During the 2019 through 20 school year, Jeff began work in Norwalk Public Schools, where he was recruited to create and teach a broadcast journalism and technology curriculum that introduced marketing, app development, podcasting, and live broadcasting components into the West Rocks middle school community. From 2020 to 2023, he served the district as its first lead instructional coach for digital learning. And in 2023, Jeff began a new job as a director of digital learning for Region 9 school district, serving the communities of Easton and Redding, Connecticut. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I reached out to you because we're both part of the Teach Better podcast network, and you also have started the TeacherCast Educational Network. We'll get to those questions about both your Ask the Tech Coach podcast and the network that you created. But let's start off with the question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches in Minister Carlisle.
Well, I feel like I'm in the trenches right now. In fact, as we're recording this, I've completed my first 6 weeks as a new administrator. My current position right now, I'm in love with. I'm the director of digital learning for 3 school districts, and I've been absolutely fantastic. I feel like every day you walk in and, the fire hydrant is turned on, so to say, and you're just trying to survive every single moment of it. I've been redefining that book title of how do you make friends and influence others, because the whole thing is just, here's the vision. How do we get there? And, it's April. They want to leave school and we're just starting out here. So having a good time with it. But right now, I really do feel like I'm digging the trench right now to hopefully get out of it in a few more months before the school year starts again.
And this is a year-round position, correct?
Yes, my first. So, the first thing that they say is welcome. The second thing is, when do you want to take your vacation days? And my answers are about July and August. They're no, 5 days you get. So you get 5. So, everything is brand new and having a good time with it. The staff is amazing. My administration team has welcomed me with open arms, and I'm just in love with the position right now and having a good time.
Great. Well, you started the TeacherCast Educational Network back in 2011. And so you recorded the TeacherCast podcast back then. And, I just started maybe listening to podcasts in 2009. And so in that time frame, podcasts were not really the big thing they are now, especially in the educational realm. So what got you into just wanting to create podcasts?
I fell into it. I long and short, I was a music teacher before, and, I was a conductor, and, basically I was living in South Jersey, the Philadelphia region, and I had an opera company in New York, and I had an orchestra in the middle of Pennsylvania. I was just all over the place, but I was living the life, right? Kids came, and I'm a performer, so you can't be running all around. And I still had a thirst for performance. I still had a thirst for having an audience. I still had a thirst for, I'm a creature of feedback, I guess. And the podcast medium is great because you have that. Instead of going to a stage, you bring the stage to you, and your microphone is your podium, and the screens are your audience. And there's a lot of similarities between the music world and what I do on the show, and the music world and what I do in my current position. I mean, even now I'm getting asked the questions so you're the director of but you're a music guy. I'm just give me a chance. You'll realize that every building is an orchestra section. Every principal is a building, as a section leader. When I meet with you one-on-one, those are sectionals and rehearsals. And so I run TeacherCast as if it was an orchestra, but I also run the school district as if it was an orchestra too. And so I kind of make peace with the fact that I'm no longer on the stage, but I miss it every day. At the same time, I get a chance to stay fulfilled with that whole audience participation and getting to meet people and going to conferences and things like that. So, you just change one medium for the next and having a good time with it.
Mm-hmm. And was that around the time when you started the TeacherCast Network that you moved from being a music teacher to working with technology?
Yeah, I started the TeacherCast basically came around because I was doing some PD in my school as a music teacher. This is when, like, should we use iPhones? How do you use iPhones? What is an iPad? Like all of that year. And one thing hit the other. I kind of met somebody who was already doing a show. We became friends, and I said, I'd love to do this for teachers. And long and short, he basically like pushed me off the tree branch and said, go fly, kid. And July 11th, 2001, I'll never forget the night. I couldn't sleep. I woke up, and by 1 a.m, I had the logo, I had the domain bought, I had all the social media created, and it just fired off and fired off and fired off. And here we are 12 years later having a good time. And it's been amazing.
Yeah. And that's really great. It says just in the information that you've amassed a following of more than 50,000 followers on social media. And then you've also helped a lot of people start their own podcasts. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about
Sure.
advice. I know you have some information on your website, buildyouredubrand.com, but you've also given training to the Teach Better team podcasters. But what would you say to somebody who wants to start a podcast and might feel like, they want to hit a particular niche, but it might be very similar to some other podcasts. And this isn't necessarily just for educators. It could be of any interest.
No, my answer is going to surprise you. Talk to your spouse. They say that if you can get 8 episodes in, you're doing a good job. They say if you can get 20 episodes in, you're pretty much going to survive, and you're kind of in that lifer term. But if you think about it, you do one show every 2 weeks. 8 episodes is 4 or 5 months, right? You do 20, that's a year, right? So if you're gonna get into this, it is a relationship that you're purchasing. And I say purchasing because obviously there's a financial cost in this, but it takes some time away from the family. And I always look at this as, yes, I'm in here in my office doing my thing, enjoying it, meeting people, talking, helping people, and etc. But I'm also then leaving this and I turn around and there's my kids. It's not that I turn around and I have to drive 150 miles. So when you're looking at all of this, it is a family event, even though there might only be one voice. But to really answer your question, I mean, it's just a matter of having a conversation, and we talked about this before. Like, I'm not feeling like I'm being interviewed right now. I just feel like we're having a great conversation. And if you have an idea of who your audience is, like who's the one person you're speaking to, just speak with that person. If you're going to do a monologue show, or if you're doing a conversation, just speak to that one. Like, what does that person want? And what does that person want to hear from your guest? And in the music world, we say that the conductor is the only person on stage that doesn't make any sound. However, you are the conduit between Beethoven and the orchestra. You have to figure out what Beethoven wanted when he wrote the thing, and then you do your gestures, and that's how the orchestra needs to respond to you. It's no different than this. I kind of have an idea when I do a coaching show what my coaches are looking for if they click the play button on a show called AI in the Classroom, right? So what would my audience want to learn from this? That's what channels my question. So it's not always me asking the questions. I kind of put myself in that, okay, well, like, how does Beethoven want to hear this? And I just channel myself through it. And I have a great time. Most of my shows I do cold. I don't recommend that. I totally don't recommend doing that your first year. I always say your first 50 episodes are kind of not going to be as good as your next 50 episodes. I've been doing this for 12 years. I've been, thousands of episodes. I'm still learning how to do it. I still have to check myself before I even start on the microphone, even though I've come into a routine and, the first, one of my shows, it's the same line. It's the this, it's the that. You always have to check that.
Yeah.
But it's still a conversation on a topic, no matter what you're doing, and no matter who you're doing it with. And I love that. The conductor always walks on stage the same way, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I like how you transfer that from the conducting piece. Like what does the audience want to hear when you're playing music that's the orchestra is the medium through
Right.
which you're playing Mozart, right? And I'm in choir, so we're the medium through which we're playing what has been written, right? So
Exactly.
but like as a podcaster, it's yeah, it's the medium, it's the conversation, the topic that you have during the conversation, but
Yep. And at the
what do
end
you
of the
want your
day,
listeners to get out of it? Yeah.
at the end of the day, the orchestra doesn't need you. You're just up there waving your hands like a silly person. So what is the role of the
Uh-huh.
host?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You start the show, you stop the show, and you change tempos in the middle of it. Other than that, get out of the guest's way. They're
Mhm.
here to listen to the guest. And, we can talk about, advice for podcasters and things like that all day long, but really it's just you're having a conversation and who are you speaking to? And once you get that done, you realize there's no real need for editing because there is no editing spots. People say and ahs and ers and stuff like
Yeah.
that because they're thinking. Well, how often do you ers and ahs when you're like out to dinner with somebody? Not as much because it's just a flowing conversation. That's what I hope the podcast can be.
And you have a podcast on the Teach Better Network, Ask the Tech Coach, and
Mhm.
this is, from what I understand, a co-hosted podcast, or do you take turns with hosting duties?
We're up to 246 episodes
Mhm.
or so at the time of recording this. I've had the fortune to have many, many amazing co-hosts. And sometimes I do the show by myself. Sometimes I do the show with others. I've had some amazing people as like my permanent wing people, and I love being able to bounce ideas off of it.
Okay.
I love the show. I think I love it more now because I'm not officially a coach. So you're getting back in the saddle, but you're in a position you're not there anymore. So I always want to keep connected. And I find I'm saying this now as I walk into schools and I'm meeting a new cast of characters at my schools. Like, yes, it says director of, and yes, I've got the pretty office, but I never want to forget that I'm a coach. I never want to forget that I'm a teacher. I never want to lose that connection. So I like doing this show now because it keeps me grounded. It keeps those topics. It keeps me thinking about instructional strategies as opposed to like when the day-to-day is
Yeah.
spreadsheets
Mhm.
and corporate meetings and put out fires and stuff like that. Right.
Uh-huh.
I always want to remind myself that, I'm a teacher that is a very lucky to have this position, but I'm a
Mhm.
teacher. Right.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think you see a lot of administrators struggle with that balance. They want to stay in the classrooms, but it's hard to be a principal.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I always have a baton in my hand when I walk into that classroom. And here we go. We're going to have a good time with this.
Yeah, and that's the best sort of leader. We're directors, the people that have like they haven't forgotten their job of being a teacher or a
Yeah.
coach. They
I
haven't
just have to
forgotten about
remind
the people they serve. Yeah.
Right. I just have to remind myself that these people don't know me yet, and they see me as the central office figure coming in. Why is he in my classroom? And it's that vibe. But I want people who I work with, especially in the classroom level, to know, like, no, I'm one of you. Like, my whole job is how do you get digital learning working? I just happen to be the one making the calls at this point, right? But how can we help create an authentic learning experience for our students that's based and rooted through ISTE standards and digital learning practices and strategies? It's no different than the podcast. I mean, everything is focused on how do we help teachers help other teachers? How do we help teachers help their students? How do we create an environment where students and teachers want to be together, creating an amazing, authentic learning experience?
Yeah, there's always going to be more, learning, more new things out there for the teachers to learn. I mean, 3 years ago during the pandemic was that big learning curve for a lot of people, but there's still things that people haven't tried, and there's always new apps and new ways of presenting material and having kids work with things that We need the coaches and the directors of digital learning.
It's ABC, always be coaching.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've also given a TEDx talk called Creating a Spark of Innovation. Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
I am so fortunate to have been accepted. 2016. I keep calling it my first. I wish it was my first, which means I'd like to get a second one. But I had an opportunity to talk about my kids, and I had an opportunity to talk about the journey that I was on at the time, and I'm still on. They're 9-year-old triplets right now, and it was an amazing experience to get up there and to do it. And I remember preparing, and at the end of the day, on the drive up, I just basically had a conversation with myself and said, "Screw this, I'm going to wing it."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I ripped up everything that I was going to do the night before, and basically all of my slides just turned into pictures, mostly of the kids. And I just spoke from the heart, and it's no different than the podcast. I mean, like, again, I'm not sitting here writing a script and then giving a monologue. Like, here's the topic. We're all educators. I'm going to teach you. And I think the thing that I'm mostly surprised at from that TED Talk, and I did not plan this at all, I think it was like 18 minutes and 12 seconds. And 18 minutes is like the cutoff, right? So I don't know how I got it right on the 18-minute mark, but that was my biggest accomplishment for that day. Like, I had no idea where I was in the time, and I didn't care, right? Like, you've got the stage, run with it. But when I got off the stage and they're like, "You did it, 18 minutes." I'm like, damn. So that was awesome on that one. But no, and I would recommend anybody try that stuff. I would also recommend, if we're going to keep on that topic, recently, about a year and a half ago, I joined a professional organization called the Toastmasters. And a Toastmasters is a public speaking international society, or whatever you want to call it. But every other week, we do Toastmasters meetings here, and it's an opportunity to stand up and to try things and to test it out. It's, you hear a lot of stand-ups. They go to the clubs and they try all these different things, and then they go and do like their Netflix special, right? That's what I see Toastmasters as. Every week you're getting up, you're trying material, you're trying different things, you're practicing, you're getting feedback, you're seeing others. So that way, when you do have a class, or you do have an ISTE session, or you do get your TED Talk, or you do get your opportunity to be on your podcast, like all of these different things are steps to prepare you for real world, authentic scenarios. A job interview is just as important as a TED Talk.
And so Toastmasters is something I've heard about. I've never actually gone to a meeting, but do they then meet in person weekly? And then does everybody get a chance to kind of, or somebody who has an upcoming presentation? So how does that work? Are you in small groups?
I can only speak for my own club, but essentially a Toastmasters meeting, and I'll do this in the 30 seconds here. It's in 3 parts. There's always the presentations of prepared speeches. So, every meeting in our club, like one person, between 1 and 3 people get up and they do like a 4 to 7 minute prepared speech. And there's an evaluation process. So somebody gets up and, says nice things about them. And then the second half, they do what's called table topics, which is essentially 1 to 3 minute improv. And the table topics master gets up and, here's the topic, go speak on it. And I love that, because I love doing improv. That's the podcaster coming out. Again, the TED Talk was all off the cuff, right? So I love being able just to get up there and riff and see that, on the top of my head, in 1 minute and 60 seconds, can you do an intro, 3 supporting things, a closing, and then a coda? So essentially, can I do a 5-paragraph essay, if you're looking at it in teacher terms, all off the top of my head on this random topic? And can you come out of it alive? Now, what is that? You translate that into our world as teachers, right? Mom walks into the parent-teacher conference and says, "How's my kid doing?" What's going to come out of your mouth? You have a minute. You have to do this is where we are with Johnny. Here's 3 things that Johnny likes doing. Here's what I need Johnny to do. Thanks. See you later. Have a good time. So all of this improv directly goes back into the classroom, directly goes into when I walk into the superintendent's office. It's here's the thing. Here's 3 reasons why we're looking for it. What do you think? Thanks. See ya. It's all real world authentic training, and I would highly recommend it.
Yeah. And that's also something like for interviews as well. That helps.
100%.
Yeah.
What is an interview question, right? Give me the
Yeah.
situation. Give me the STAR method. Situation, give me the reaction, give me the action steps, and then tell me what's going to happen next. Learn how to speak in that little, what they call the STAR method. You guys can Google that one. But that's how you present your topics. But you realize it's just a lesson plan. And then you realize as a podcaster, no, it's your show. Welcome to my show. Here's the 3 things. Call to action. See you later. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I think that's good to let people know about that. And I think those are, a lot of people getting into those spaces, whether it be, going into professional development, whether they are looking to, speak to a greater audience at a TED Talk or keynoting. I think, Toastmasters is a great way to get that feedback at the local level before you actually have that speech, right? So thanks for including that. In terms of conferences, I know you probably have presented in past years at ISTE, but now with this new role, are you planning on presenting at ISTE or any other conferences coming up? Okay.
ISTE this year is in Philadelphia, my hometown. I feel like it's a home game. If you come and see me, I'm buying pretzels for everybody, right? Like I'm looking forward to this. I do have some sessions coming up. I think I'm on a Sunday and a Monday, and I'm trying to find all these other sessions happening and stuff, but I'm absolutely looking forward to it. Looking forward to being there with my family, walking around. And again, it's a professional time for me. It's not summer vacation anymore. So having a good time with all that and looking forward to seeing, even last year in New Orleans, it was great to see everybody. I'm hoping to see more people this year, hoping that this year I don't walk out of ISTE with COVID like I did last year, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but those those conferences are always great opportunity, like the Teach Better conference as well, to connect with people that through a variety of, what you do just and what you've been doing for the past 11 years.
Absolutely.
And you also on your website, you talk about that you do some tech coaching kind of as a side gig for districts. And I was just wondering, is that something you're still able to do or maybe do virtually every so often? And what can people expect if they wanted to work with you?
I've been busy recently and I love that. And this is always the busy time of year where I get a chance to meet educators, whether they be coaches or looking to be coaches. And I mean, even last week, I did a 2.5 hours with somebody who was looking to get a new coaching job, couldn't figure out how to break through the interview cycle. And it was just an awesome experience. And I love being in this position to be able to help other people. But we went through their resume, we did interview questions, we did, how do you search for things? How do you prepare your portfolio? I mean, we did a good 2.5 hours and we called that part 1. And I love those experiences of being able to help out teachers with their careers, with their passions. And again, on the top of the website, it's always been a place for teachers to help other teachers or a place for coaches to help other coaches. I do also enjoy working with school districts. I've had the fortunate over the last 12 years to be able to help out, bring in coaching programs, maintain coaching programs. How do you make the most out of coaching programs? I mean, I'm working on my book right now that is about how do you create and maintain a positive culture for digital learning through the use of instructional coaches. So there's so much out there and I love working with school districts. So, if you're an educator, coach, or an administrator, please reach out. I'm happy to work with you. And I think it's important that we all have these discussions, whether they be short conversations or long-term programs and projects. The concept of how do we create these authentic learning experiences, or I really want to be a coach. How do I get there? Do I need to get Google Level 1 or MIE or whatever it happens to be? And what does that mean for my portfolio, my resume? And I love those questions. I mean, I'm right now coming off the high of landing where I am right now. So I love this topic and would love to share these experiences and opportunities with people. So that way they can also benefit from this.
Yeah, for somebody who's been in that role, like in working through, just the interview cycle and knowing kind of what districts expect. Yeah, definitely. It's great that you're able to support people. I did want to hear a little bit more about your book, in terms of when you could expect completion or it to be out, and who are you publishing that through?
Well, some of those questions I can answer. Right now, the only thing on my mind is that it's due to the publisher on July 1st.
Okay.
And right now, I've got a team of 20 plus or so fantastic, loving souls who are reading it and ripping it apart and helping me through it. And we're currently right now, we're working through the Ask the Tech Coach podcast. We're doing, a show, and then I write the chapter, and then we do a show, and then I write the chapters. That way I can talk about it first, and I can get my mind out, and you and I can kind of back and forth on these things, and then I can write it. And that's just how I work as a musician. We got to do the rehearsal first, and then I'll put my notes down. And I'm having fun writing it. It's hard. It's really, really hard. And it's more intense writing than I've ever done. But I think when you look at it, you're going to say, this is the book that we need. This is the book that's not out there. It's not a book for coaches. It's not a book about coaches, but it's a book for, I always say, instructional coaches and digital learning leaders. So it's how do you create the stadium and then build the team so that way you can win the game. So if the team is the coaches and the stadium is the digital learning box around it, how do you put the frame around everything? And how do you do that in a way that it's standards based? And how do you build the team so that way you have a first baseman and a catcher and a pitcher and a right fielder, and they all complement each other, because you can't just have a bunch of first basemen. You have to have lefties and righties. You have to have pitchers and outfielders. So it's how do you put all of this together? And again, I'm just so fortunate enough to be walking into my current position. Like, this is the position. And here's the manual for how we're going to move forward. And then how do you use that to your advantage? And how do we get there? So I talk a lot about the innovation curve, and how do we get people from the right side of the innovation curve to the left side of the innovation curve?
Yeah, and just kind of a lot of the things that you talk about in your podcast having to do with what you're experiencing as well, in this new role, right? And then you're just using a lot of the day-to-day experience when you write some of the chapters.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not, I don't go to work and then podcast about it. Like that's not going to fly. That's certainly not kosher. But there's certain things that are universal that I've been talking about for years, right? Why should you have a great looking Google website that's got all of these amazing things, and your kids can go to it and it's great, but on the other side of the school district, I don't have a great looking website because maybe I don't want to do that, or maybe I don't have those skills, or maybe I never thought about putting that stuff up there. Why are my kids at a disadvantage? That doesn't work on the equity scale. So how do we create an environment where we're both sharing the same thing? And maybe you can motivate me to do things, or you can teach me how to do things. But at the same time, if you've got stuff on all of these great Padlet walls, for instance, can my kids take advantage of that too? And that's not a lazy thing. That's a strategic thing. So how do we put everybody in a position where we're all learning from each other? And if you're going to work for 5 minutes and I work for 5 minutes, then our kids are going to get 15 minutes of advantage out of that. And I'm a big believer in an addition by addition. So how do we build an environment where everybody wins?
Yeah, it's about not recreating the wheel. Right?
100%. 100%. And right now I'm the guy that makes the wheels, and that's awesome. Right. But as a coach, you're the one that connects the wheels, right? You are a coach is a fulcrum. They're at and I use these terms lightly, but you're at the top of the teacher chain because you're the mentor coming down, but you're also at the bottom of the administrator chain because you're the ambassador for what the classroom is saying. So you're in this middle ground where the sand is dripping, and you need to make sure that when the sand is coming from the administration into the classroom, you're the voice. You are the one that says how we're going to meet the demands and the needs of the strategic plan and the district plan and the dips and the pips and all that other good stuff. And it's a matter of how do we build that box so that way the student is the one taking advantage of everything. And then how do you do it successfully? So that way they, like, you know, I want to learn how to do this. I need to learn how to do this because, and again, so innovation curve right to left is basically the book.
So in your role, you do work a lot with the tech coaches in the different districts, but also sometimes you work directly with the teachers in the classroom.
In my current position, which has been 6 weeks, I am trying really hard to sit in my office and learn as much as possible. Okay. But at the same time, I'm trying really hard to not be in my office at all.
Sure.
So I've got some projects that I'm working on, and I'm using those projects to go meet people. Usually when you're in an administrative role, you do like the listening walk and you go around and you meet people. And I'm using the projects that I'm working on right now to do so. And certain projects I'm working on require both, you know, teacher, administrative, library, IT. I mean, we're redesigning our communications plan. So this requires everybody. Like, you know, the new guy can't come in and change everything around. It's a community event. There's history. There's all these different legacy items. So I'm using this to really get a sense of where they are. I'm using this to really help the district get a sense and feel of who I am and my personality and how I work and how I think and where the visions and stuff are, because eventually we're going to be sitting down and having the hard conversations about when you walk into a classroom, what do you want to see from the teacher? So we're looking at things like portrait of a graduate, and I'm walking in going, well, what's the portrait of a classroom? Because before you say, what do I want the student to look like as they leave, we have to say, how do we want to get them there? And that's the fun part. So, you know, making friends and influencing others.
Yeah. And definitely just getting a feel for what their needs are and, you know, how to move that forward. You know, there's a lot of moving parts, like you said, the district improvement plan, everything.
I'll be honest. I've been there for 6 weeks. I've probably made 6 times 5. I've probably made 100 mistakes, right? Some of them big, some of them small. We all do that. So how do you keep moving forward, and how do you not let the egos fly? Because look, it's the end of the year.
Yeah. Well, we've had a great conversation about your background and some of the work that you've done with podcasting and influencing others just through your work as a tech coach and podcaster. Out of everything we talked about on the podcast, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I think the one thing I want people to remember is that if you think you can or can't, you're always right. It's just a motto that I've had. It's a motto that I talked about for many, many years. Even when I was an orchestra teacher, I made up this big, huge poster. Actually, my kids made up this big, huge poster and gave it to me one day. It's a Henry Ford quote, but basically, look, if you think you can stand on a stage, go stand on a stage. If you think you can conduct at Carnegie Hall, go for it. You think you can raise triplets, go for it. If you think you can advance your career to go be X, Y, and Z, don't let anybody stop you. Have a vision, have a plan, have a backup, and then have a backup for that backup. But always make sure that you are in a position. And if you don't, or if you need help, come and ask the tech coach. I'm always happy to help.
Where can people connect with you and find you online?
You can always go over to TeacherCast.net. We've got a whole mess of stuff. I mean, I've got, you know, parts on there about how do you do podcasting with your students? How do you get them to be good writers? How do you do video? How do you make websites? You had mentioned the Build Your EDU brand stuff. That's all personal connected branding. How do you build a marketing plan, and how do you build a podcast and a newsletter and drip like all of that stuff? You can kind of see where my career has been just by looking at the dates on the posts, essentially. And there's so much stuff there. And honestly, I don't even promote it all. I mean, the last 6 months of podcasts, I probably have only put 2 of them out on social media, just because that's the one thing I don't have time to do. So head on over to teachercast.net. You can find everything there. AskTheTechCoach.com is my coaching resources, but, please just feel free to reach out, feedback@teachercast.net. Would love to have you. And I'll kind of end as I always end, but, keep up the great work in your classrooms, everybody. And please continue sharing your passions with the world.
Thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure having you on.
My pleasure.